Hello everyone, welcome back to another BookTrib live chat. Today we are talking about time-tested tools to enhance your well-being with Alan C. Fox, author of People Tools, 54 Strategies for Building Relationships, Creating Joy, and Embracing Prosperity. It's the book that Bill Cosby says will do a lot for the world. Now, Alan has achieved tremendous success in his professional and personal life. He has university degrees in accounting, law, education, and writing. His real estate company manages more than $15 billion of commercial property in 11 states, and he is the founder, editor, and publisher of the award-winning and highly esteemed poetry journal, Rattle. He also sits on the board of directors for several nonprofit foundations. You can find him over at peopletoolsbook.com and on Twitter at Alan C. Fox. You can purchase a book of your very own over at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and Books A Million. And today we are giving away free copies of People Tools, so after the chat, head on over to BookTrib and enter to win. As always, please remember to sign up at BookTrib.com to get the latest on live chats, giveaways, and original content. So please help me welcome Alan Fox.
Well, if I could ask Socrates anything, the first step to take before you're able to embrace change is to know who you are. You have to know what you like, what you don't like. For example, many people ask me what career should they go into, and my answer always is look at something you really love. Because if you love what you're doing and you have joy in what you do every day, you'll do quite well. And there was a book years ago, Do What You Love, the Money Will Follow. So knowing yourself, I think, is the first step and the key. Yes. The question is, do you ever travel? Yes. I've never been to New Zealand. I really love to go there. I've traveled to many places. Over last Thanksgiving, I was at Easter Island and Bora Bora, and I love traveling in Scotland. Most important advice a mentor ever gave me was this. I was asked. I was in my early 20s, and I was working on big deals, big business deals. And I met a banker, and he said, "Alan, don't work on a deal which will take 5 years to either succeed or not. Do smaller deals, so you can do 2 a month, and they will succeed, and you'll do better." And I took that advice to heart, and I tend to do things which are doable, which will happen all the time, instead of something which will take a long time to reach fruition. Can't see that. Oh, get more. Could you get me more, please, on that? Okay, things that changed in my life. The fried egg was interesting because I like my eggs easy over, and when you flip them over and the yolk breaks, you're going to have a hard yolk, and that's really not too pleasant. And all my life I've been doing this, and one day I flipped it over, the yolk broke, and I thought, this egg cost me about 9 cents. I can just throw it out and do another one. And I think my people tool sunk cost is important here. For example, if you go to a movie, you've driven there, you've parked, you bought a ticket, you're sitting in the theater, and you've spent 10 or 15 minutes. If you don't like the movie, I'm not going to stay there another hour or two. I'm just going to leave. So I think things I want to change are things I don't like in my life and things that I can make better. This happens with people also. I read a book by Harry Brown years ago entitled How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. And he was saying that every time you make room in your life, if you have a relationship that doesn't work, leave it. Make room in your life for another better relationship. And I think that's very, very important. Time is the most important thing we have, And whether we remember this or not, it's time is limited. So you got to pay attention to that and have people in your life that are supportive, that are positive, because we all kind of feed off of each other. So I would say changing people and not spending time at something I don't enjoy. How long did it take to write people tools? Well, I started when I was in the fine Masters of Professional Writing program at USC, and that was in the early 90s. That's when I got the idea for the book, and I started writing chapters. And I don't know if I have ADD or not, but I'm easily bored. So writing a chapter for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 pages is fine. The idea of writing an entire 200-page book is somewhat daunting. So over the years, as I discovered better ways to live my life, I tried to come up with catchy titles so that I would remember those methods, those tools, and started collecting them. And the process, I'll tell you something. One thing that helped the process is a friend of mine, Nancy Miller, to whom the book is partly dedicated, really helped me with the editing. And finally, I told her, I said, Nancy, I love writing chapters. I don't want to organize them. Would you please do that? So the process, when it became collaborative, worked a lot better. And that's something I recommend in writing. How can you get better at saying no to people? Good question. I think that is very, very important, because as I write in People Tools, you can't really say a full-hearted yes unless you know that you can say no if you have to. And for me, saying no used to be very difficult because I didn't want to disappoint people, or more importantly, I didn't want other people to be upset with me for being disappointed. But if you have children, you got to say no to them, and do that fairly frequently, because children want everything all the time. And I think that the best way is practice. I think just practicing. Have a friend ask you for something and discuss that. You're going to say no. Find out how that feels. To me, it sometimes feels very, very difficult. But if you practice like anything else, you'll get better at it. And learn to say no on some of the easy things. If you don't want to do something, you don't want to do something else. Another way to get better at saying no is by providing an alternative. So if someone says, let's go see this movie, you might say, no, but I'd be happy to go to dinner with you, or something else. So have an alternative. Okay. In my travels, the happiest people, I think the most unusual place I traveled to was Bali, and the people there live in communities, and the communities are very important. In fact, when I was in Bali about 3 years ago, I was told by many people that they couldn't travel because everyone in the village is expected to attend all of the celebrations, and generally they have a celebration every 4 or 5 days on something. So if you live there and you want to participate in everything, you kind of have to stay home. But in the United States, I live in Los Angeles, and it's a very big city, and goes forever. So as some people joke, you're lucky to meet somebody in the first place. But in Bali, they are very community oriented, and I think that's a very important part of life. So I would say those are the happiest people. Good question. I have degrees in accounting, law, education, and professional writing, and did all of those different areas help me? Absolutely. In my business, I'm a numbers guy, and that's possibly my first love. And I know many people, it's like me, foreign language. I don't do foreign languages. I'm scared of it. I don't like to do the memorization, but several of my children are outstanding at foreign language. So accounting definitely helps, because you got to keep records when you have a business. My brother had his own business, and he would ask me for help every so often, and I would say, David, let me see your financial statements. And he would say, well, I don't have them. And he didn't actually do his financial statements until he had to file his tax return the following year. But in my business, where we have commercial real estate and 70 odd properties, we have to do the accounting and do them right. Law, I found, is very good for teaching you how to think and analyze problems. Because in law school, you look at cases and courts interpreting law, and I think that the process of learning and how to think and how to analyze is very, very important. The practice of law, which I did for about 4 or 5 years, wasn't too much fun because largely you're fighting with people, and I didn't do too much of that. I usually would tell my client, well, maybe you can't do it this way, but here's another way you can do it. Education was counselor ed. In my 20s, I realized I was very shy with people. I had great difficulty meeting strangers, and it's tough to do a business and syndicate real estate when you're afraid to meet strangers. So I went back to counselor ed, and interestingly enough, I found that really the biggest secret I found was, first of all, be honest with people and just be open with them and tell them I don't know or whatever it is, and that's really a good way to go. And the second is a people tool, which is not in the book, it'll be in the next book, which is what I call ticker tape, meaning just blurt it out. When I had my first lunch with my wife, she said she worked at a rare bookstore where I was a customer, and she said she didn't date customers, and I thought I was going to lose her unless I did something creative at lunch, and I came up with ticker tape, meaning I just blurted out. I said, hey, I'm going to try to persuade you to date me at this lunch. When I try to be persuasive, I am very persuasive, and just went through why I liked her and what I wanted, and at the end of lunch, she agreed to go out with me. And professional writing, again, really quite important. I've written all of my life, but until I took the professional writing course, a number of teachers, and I took courses in nonfiction and poetry. I took a course in playwriting, and you have to hone your skill, I think, no matter what it is. So I think all four I found very interesting and very useful. I'm kind of a pragmatic guy, so I like things that are useful, and I found all four to be excellent. All right. Yeah, we all have that one friend doesn't have our best interests at heart. What point do you give up the friendship and expect and accept the bad mannered behavior? I got a people tool in my book exactly for that, and I call it SNP. If somebody is not good for you, I had a friend for 10 or 12 years. We traveled together. We were good friends. And then I loaned him money one day, and he stopped payment on his repayment check, and he wouldn't pay me. And life is too short. I like to hang out with people who are positive, people I like who like me. And also for me, it's important that people tell the truth. So I always think, again, another people tool, which I live by, is patterns persist. So if you find a pattern in another person, if they're always late, if they lie to you, if they're negative. My brother, I loved him dearly. He died about 10 years ago. But I stopped going to movies with him because whenever we went out of a movie, he said, did you notice the continuity wasn't perfect and this was a problem? He was criticizing the movie. I don't go to a movie to analyze it. I go to enjoy myself. So you might also think that different people in your life are good for different things. Some people like going to the ballet. Other people like going to movies. Other people want to go to sports events. So find people and who you like being with in different circumstances. But, if they're negative about you, about your relationship, I would terminate the relationship as soon as possible and make room in your life for a better relationship. All right, how can you avoid inflicting stereotypical ideas on your children? Boy, that is an outstanding question, and the problem is that often we're not even aware of our stereotypes because we grew up with them. When I was growing up, for example, at the family dinner, we passed around a dish towel. In other words, didn't know about paper napkins. And when a woman I was dating in high school, who became my first wife, came to dinner, she was horrified. Here we are passing around a paper towel, wiping our lips, and then passing it on to the next person. Well, people don't do that, but my stereotype was that's perfectly fine. So I think to avoid inflicting that, you really have to stay in the moment, especially with your children, and pay attention to them and catch your children being good. Listen to them. They have very interesting things to say, and if you pay attention, and also pay attention to your own stereotypes, and if someone calls you on one and says, hey, you know, that's really not necessarily the case, think about it and be open. I always think that all of my conclusions are kind of a working hypothesis, meaning I could change my mind in tomorrow or next year or in 5 years. So everything I know, I am always thinking about and trying to improve and testing whether or not it is still true today. Most influential book, I read a book as a young adult called Summerhill by Neil something or other. He was the headmaster of a boarding school in England. And this is when I first had young children. And he was saying, because my father was big on spanking and that kind of stuff, and I vowed as a kid I would never, ever be physical with my children, and I haven't. But Summerhill kind of reinforced my idea. And it said that, with children, and this man was the headmaster, so they had a lot of children under his care at the boarding school. He said, you just never use physical abuse. Also, another book which is influential is called Catch Them Being Good, about raising children. And it says, to reinforce behavior, praise it. And my father didn't do that. My father thought if he praised me, I would get a big head, get arrogant, and stop trying. So that's the way I tended to live my life until I found out, as a young adult, you catch people being good. When people catch me being good, when they say, Alan, that's great, I really like that, I want to do it again. So catch people being good, and also with kids, catch your kids being good. I think that's very important. I was thrilled at the Bill Cosby quote. What really thrilled me was, and we didn't tell him what to say. It's Bill Cosby, and he has good taste. And when he came up with this book will do a lot for the world. That is exactly why I wrote the book, to help people live a better life. And I was so glad that he saw that in the book, and that's what he chose to focus on, because that is exactly my purpose in writing people tools. Let people see this. Uh, Center for the Healing Arts. I was on the board of directors there many years ago, and that was for cancer patients who didn't have money and wanted supportiveness and access to opportunities in the community for their help, for support groups, etc. And you know, I mean, in life, we all deal with people, other people, just about every day. And I think it's important to support people. And if you're lucky enough to do reasonably well in your life, or, even if you don't do reasonably well, I find that helping other people is just a treat. And it helps me to appreciate my life even more. So that was what the Center for the Healing Arts was about. And other boards that I've been on various charitable organizations. Other books in the works. Yes, I do. I'm writing two novels. One is entitled Letters from My Dad. It's about a man, 48 years old, who learns that he's going to die of pancreatic cancer in about 6 months, and his son is 6 months old. So he knows he will not be there for his son as his son grows up. And so the man writes a letter to his son to be delivered on each birthday, first birthday, second birthday, etc., going up to age 48, because since he's 48, he can't do anything more than that in his mind. And it's a sort of book which talks about the things we do want to pass on to our children, and this will do that, I think, hopefully in a heartfelt way. Another book I'm working on with two women friends of mine. You know, I read 50 Shades of Grey, which was interesting. I thought the writing was terrible, as most people do, but sure sold a lot of copies. So two women friends of mine and I are working on a book called Menage a Trois about relationships, and you know, that might be out sometime next year. Good question. Switch gears to be more positive. I think you have to be aware of the problem all the time. For example, I went away for a 1 week trip over last Thanksgiving, and I was at my office. I had one huge project to complete before I left on Saturday. I was leaving Saturday morning at 6 a.m. On Friday, I came into my office at 9 a.m. in the morning, and here I was at 10 p.m. working on the project, and I started saying to myself, Alan, you're going to be tired, you won't be able to finish, you won't get enough sleep. I said, wait a minute. I'm not tired now. I can sleep on the airplane when I leave on Saturday. Please, Alan, don't give yourself negative messages. And you know, we all talk to ourselves inside our heads all the time. You know, can I make the stoplight or should I stop? And when you talk to yourself, pay attention and give yourself positive messages. I'm not talking about unrealistic, but when I was sitting there at 10 p.m., I said, give yourself the message that you can do this. And I did that, and at 1 o'clock I was finished. So I think you have to really pay attention and be aware, and that way you can change patterns in your life for the better. Also, be with people who are positive. Be positive to them. So when you congratulate your friends and when you're happy for them when they succeed and positive with them, that's good practice. They will be positive with you, and that'll help you to be more positive with yourself. What would I tell a 16-year-old version of myself? Oh my goodness. What I'm thinking is, would that 16-year-old version really listen, which is kind of a problem. I'll assume, Olivia, that you're 16 or you have children 16. I think that I would try to convey that life is a lot of fun. It's up to you to make a life for yourself. Too often we all try to find answers outside ourselves. The doctor will give us a shot or a pill and cure us. And then we find out, you know, I've had bad posture most of my life, and I now have a problem with my spine. So I've been doing yoga for a year, and it's helped a lot. So on 16-year-olds, I would listen to them, listen to their dreams, their aspirations, share about me when I was 16, and above all, I would be honest. I'm very honest with my children. I tell them the truth. That's why I write in People Tools about visible rules and invisible rules. There's some rules that are invisible that nobody will tell you, but that's the way to live. If someone gives you a present that you really don't care for, you know, are you going to say, oh, that's awful. How could you possibly have done that? No, you say, thank you very much. I really appreciate the thought, and I appreciate you being in my life. So I would tell 16-year-olds to be positive, and if they're like me, try not to be afraid of strangers so much, and get practice in being with people. What inspired me to write the book? It's kind of on People Tools. I read something years ago where a author won a Nobel Prize for literature and was called on the telephone by a reporter. The reporter said, well, what do you think about this? And the author said, well, I don't know. I haven't written about it yet. So I find that when I have an idea, my mind doesn't work in a way that I can think through the entire idea just by sitting and thinking. I have to think through the idea by writing. And I remember I took a course in Shakespeare when I was in law school because I was kind of bored with law school and took an evening course. And on the final exam, it was covering 5 Shakespeare plays, and I read the question. I thought, this is the best test question I've ever read in my life. And then I thought, I have no idea where to start. So I just do what I do in those circumstances. I stuff it into my subconscious and just started writing. And I was watching my hand write and saying, wow, did I know that? Did I know that? So I was inspired to write the book because I really didn't get along with people very well when I was younger. And I wanted to do that. Many people have a high emotional IQ and they get along with people very, very well. They do it naturally. I think that's great. I didn't. I think there are a lot of people who don't. And also, when you think about it, when I think about people tools, in school, you learn how to read, you learn writing, you learn other things, but there are very few courses, certainly in junior high and high school, about how to get along with other people. You have to figure it out for yourself. I wanted to help people shortcut that process. And as one of the recent questions here was, you know, if you know when you're 16, you really have a head start. And I wanted to give other people, notably my children and friends and family, and now everybody, a good head start. And that's really why I wrote People Tools. Well, on Rattle, it was very interesting. I was in a writing course with Jack Grapes, an excellent writing teacher in West Hollywood, California. And I think it was about the second or third class I had with him. He said, would somebody do a chapbook of poems written by the members of the class? And there were about 20 people in the class. And I thought, well, I have business. I have an assistant. She can probably do the work. So I volunteered, and we did a chapbook for the class. And then the next class, we did another one. And then Jack said, well, I have some poems. He publishes a poetry magazine on the bus. So I have some poems here, which, I won't be able to get to for a few years. So I just put them in Rattle. And then he said, why don't you make it a perfect binding? And why don't you use color on the cover? And that's kind of how it started. And then I met several people, Stella Sue Hansen at first, and then Tim Green, my present poetry editor, who are just marvelous. And my goal was this. Frankly, I don't like a lot of poetry. In other words, if I read 100 poems, I might love 3 of them and like 7 or 8 and dislike 50. And in this country, the United States, people tend to not really like poetry a lot. It's not real popular. But I find that the poetry that I like, written by real people, is very interesting. It's very succinct, and I like to deliver messages succinctly. And on Rattle, we're publishing some of the best poetry in the United States. And recently, we just started paying people $50 a poem, and our contributors are very excited. I will say that for Rattle, we get about 80,000 poems submitted every year, and we publish about 300. But boy, if you get in, it's really good. And I am so gratified that many, many people write and say, Alan, I really wasn't very interested in poetry, but in reading Rattle, these are very good. They really speak to me. And I wanted to make poetry accessible to regular people and not just English professors. Today's youth. When I was in high school, I participated in speech, and there was one favorite quote that I heard several times where it was saying, oh, the youth of today, they're bad for this reason and that and the other, and went on, and you think, yeah, that's true. Well, it was a quote from 2,000 years ago. So I think in every generation, we tend to think that the youth are, going to heck in a handbasket. I really don't think that's true. I think the kids are exciting. I think that they have opportunities which I didn't have when I was younger. You have things like iPads. My grandchildren, at 2 years old, they're playing music on the iPad. I met a young girl, I'd say 4 or 5 years old, on an airplane, and my wife gave her an iPad with an art app on it, and this girl came up with some lovely art right there on the airplane. So I think that let kids be kids, let them grow up, and no problem. In terms of healthy friendships and self-love, I think that's important. And I also think it's important not to take yourself too seriously. When I was a kid, I decided I would never get arrogant because getting arrogant, it seems to me, was just comes before the fall. And I think just be positive with kids and appreciate them for who they are, and like the vocabulary. I use my full vocabulary. I don't care if the kid's 2 years old. Not to show off, but to give them a start. Um, how do you push yourself to do what needs to be done? I think you have to figure out, and this is what People Tools is about, figure out yourself and what you like and what you don't like. I mean, you can tell me all you like that a certain food is really healthy and it's really good for you. My yoga teacher referred me to an outfit which sells bread with low carbohydrates, so I ordered it. Frankly, I had, one or two slices. It tasted like cardboard. So I'm not going to make that change. Find changes that are important to you and something that you like. That's very, very important. I think it was Proust who wrote a quote which I love. He says, we listen to pleasure, we obey pain. So if something is painful, you have a very big incentive to change your life there. Hopefully, you can change your life by listening to pleasure and doing things which you enjoy and which are constructive. And I usually enjoy work, and I certainly enjoy traveling in other parts of my life. On patterns, uh, yes, weaknesses and patterns keep falling into. I would say they're probably the same, and by that I mean um, certain things I'm not good at, and I keep not being good at them, and that's a pattern by now. So my father told me when I was 21, Alan, when you get married, marry someone for who they are now. Don't expect them to change. And I was 21. I was eager. Of course they would change. Of course I would change. Well, I've bad news. Change comes difficultly, and if you bet that patterns will persist, especially, that's why I say persistent patterns persist persistently, because if you've had a pattern for some time, you're unlikely to change it. I think that I don't look at people's weaknesses. My brother took a course from Peter Drucker years ago. Drucker said, for example, with employees, have them do what they're good at. For me, if you want me to do some numbers, I'm great. If you put me behind the counter of a retail store to wait on the public, I would have a tough time. So is it a weakness? Probably, but we all have strengths and weaknesses. So I'm saying when the pattern doesn't do much for you, or when it turns out with bad results, like me in the stock market, I invest in the stock market, I lose money. Okay, that's a pattern. So pattern for me is don't invest in the stock market. And the pattern is when I go to movies, I generally enjoy what gets good reviews and what other people like. So that's a pattern which I continue. So don't look at it as a weakness. Just look at it as a difference in patterns. And don't expect everyone to be just like you. They're going to have different strengths and different weaknesses, which is great because they can do stuff with you or for you that you don't want to do. Social media. Yeah, I think social media is very helpful. Again, when I was growing up, to reach many people, you had to write a letter. My mother wrote probably 2 or 3 letters to friends every day, and it took weeks to get there. I read once that Emily Dickinson, for example, who didn't publish any of her poems during her lifetime, her favorite person, her brother-in-law, moved from Amherst to Wisconsin. And that meant she would never see him again. And letters took 3 weeks to go each way. So I think that social media are very helpful. And if people need guidance, write to me at peopletoolsbook.com. I'd be happy to answer all inquiries and help you out. Although most people have found People Tools is really fun to read and pretty self-explanatory. How People Tools have changed their life? Yes, a number of people have written to me and said, wow, this came at the perfect time. And they referred to one or more People Tools, which they used, catching their children being good. Belt buckle is one people have written to me that helped them a lot, and that means watch what people do. You know, when I was in high school, I would ask girls out on a date, and their words were, "Oh, I'd love to go out with you, but gee, I'm busy Friday. How about Saturday? No, I'm busy Saturday. How about next week? Well, I don't make dates that far in advance, but I'd love to go out with you." Well, the belt buckle was they weren't going to get into my VW bug. Their words were very polite and reassuring. I find that if you expect the person to, they are what they do, and if there's a difference between what somebody does and what they say, I would believe what they do. And in my family, we talk about belt buckle, patterns persist, and these tools all the time. It's kind of entered our consciousness and our language, and is a shorthand way of communicating and helping each other to live a better life. A show that I like. Yeah, I love some movies. What have I liked recently? Haven't been to too many movies recently because with finishing People Tools and getting it out, it's been a little difficult. Um, there was one, well, a movie I liked years ago, and I happen to like sad movies, was Million Dollar Baby, which won at least one or two Academy Awards. Really excellent. Um, let me pass on that one because I'm blanking out right now on what movies I've seen lately. Never sure of what to, not sure of what to tell my children or grandchildren. Absolutely. And when I'm not sure, I tell them. I mean, I think the most important thing we can get from other people is their truth. And that's why visible and invisible rules are important to me. And I vowed when I was a kid I would always tell my children the truth, and I do. If they want to ask me about how I live my life, I will tell them because how else are you going to find out? And I think it's very important to find out the mistakes that everyone makes and the parts that work. And if I don't know, and if I can't help my child because I don't have experience in something, if they come to me for help on German or physics or higher math, I'm not the guy to talk to. I'll tell them I can't help them. What I will do is try to point them somewhere that they can receive help. Because I like to help people, but I would never lie to them or go beyond what I know. And if I only have a supposition, I'll tell them that. But just be you'll have a much better lifelong relationship with them. Um, One of my secret hobbies is, not too secret, I love reading the New York Times. And when I have a chance, I subscribe and I look at the most emailed stories and the major stories. There was one I was reading a day or two ago about the three-toed sloth. They just have these wide-ranging, fascinating articles about all kinds of things. And I find reading, especially uh, current information, to be a whole heck of a lot of fun. And there are also a few TV shows that I like to watch when I can. I prefer to watch them by recording them. 60 Minutes is one I love, and also, but don't tell anybody. Kind of like The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, but I record them because I don't like watching commercials. So I love watching a 1 hour show in about 46 minutes by just skipping the commercials. And it's a good question because you have to relieve stress and you have to have fun. As I wrote in People Tools, the first sentence is, if you have enough joy in your life, what else do you really need? That's also the last sentence. So figure out what you enjoy and do a fair amount of it. I've traveled probably 10 or 12 weeks a year for the last 30 years. I really like that. people bailing on me and making excuses. Well, people don't bail on me very often because if they bail on me twice, I'm not going to ask them again. And so they don't have to make excuses. And also, again, in watching their belt buckle, which is one of the more important people tools, I watch their belt buckle, and if they make excuses and they always have reasons, that's their pattern. I expect it to continue, and I just don't deal with them in that area. I had a friend who was always late to lunch. I would sit in the restaurant for half an hour until he arrived. Well, after a few years of that, I started meeting in my office because if I'm at my office, I can work, and if it's an half hour late, I've done productive things rather than sitting in a restaurant waiting. So I think you can develop strategies yourself to work with people. And if people are taking advantage of you, I have one friend, I realized he only came to see me when he wanted something. I have a rule about that. If I want something, I'm going to contact you twice at least and just pass the time, find out how you're doing. And then the third time I'll ask you for something. I don't think any of us likes to be taken advantage of. And if you feel consistently taken advantage of, go on to somebody else because that pattern on their part is very, very likely to continue. Magic formula. Well, I love magic. Love to watch magicians, David Copperfield, people like that. And wouldn't it be nice to have a magic formula, magic wand, a magic pill, whatever, so that you can be happy all the time? I've not found one that exists. So I think to have a happy and successful life, you have to understand that you're not going to be happy all the time. You have to take some risks, and you're not going to be successful all the time. But it's all part of life. So I'm thinking that the formula is, and maybe it's magic, maybe not, to realize that there's only one person who can live your life and do it well, and that's you. Other people can help just as you help other people. But you got to do it yourself. You got to make your own way. On People Tools, we had to push to get a publisher and to get it out there and get it sold and get advertising and whatever. So you really have to take responsibility, I would say. And I don't say that because, I'm into responsibility for its own sake. I'm totally pragmatic. But the only way to get your life to be happy and successful is to take charge of your life and realize that you are responsible. And also, it is okay to fail. If you're succeeding all the time, then you're not trying enough. And I love traveling. Sometimes I think, I went to one country in Africa and my wife got sick, and it really wasn't a very pleasant vacation, but it was still a different place, a different experience. And I think having as much varied experience in your life as you want to is also quite important to having a happy and successful life. Have variety in your life. I think that's very important. Did family members read the book? Yes. And if you look at the book, People Tools, you'll find that my son Craig, who is a professor at UCLA School of Business, wrote the introduction. And I was And yes, people in the family do read the book. My wife has been very, very helpful, although she did say, Alan, this one chapter, I don't come off too well, and I really appreciate you changing a little bit. Hey, I want to have a happy and successful life. My wife is important to me. So I didn't lie, but I changed it to make it better for her. And yes, the family members read the book, and they seem to like it. I could write a book with any author, dead or alive. Well, when I was 12 or 13, I first found out about Shakespeare, and I gotta say, that writing just blows me away. Although, frankly, I enjoy Shakespeare a lot more when it's very well performed, and I get more out of it in a good performance than just reading it. But God, I sure would like to hang out with Shakespeare for a while. And what would the book be about? I think it'd be about psychology. I think Shakespeare is one of the best psychologists going. His insights into human motivation and passions and love and hates and fears is absolutely amazing. So wouldn't it be interesting to hang out with Freud or Shakespeare, maybe add Freud, and write a book on psychology. I think that'll be a lot of fun. Stuck on a desert island. Only take 3 things with you. Um, well, if an iPad would work on the desert island, I would definitely take that because that's a window into everything in the world. Um, I would probably take my wife because companionship, I think, is very, very important. And third thing, well, I'm thinking of enough food to get along and maybe things to entertain myself. Although if the iPad worked, that's a pretty good one for me. Many thanks. It's a lot of fun. Look forward to doing it again sometime. Thank you.